Hi everybody, it's Mr. Vole here and welcome to our Year 4 history. So this is lesson 2, and in this lesson we're looking at where did the Anglo-Saxons live, so which part of Britain, and how do we know? And also we're going to be looking at where they lived at first, when they first arrived. As you know, they came from North Germany and the Denmark area, South Scandinavia, which is what we did last time. And where did they live at first, and then where did they spread out to? And because the evidence is 1500 years ago, so the evidence is hard to find. And how do we know what do historians know, and how do we know it? So here's a map showing Britain, and down here, this is where we live, just about there, just north of the Isle of Wight. And this is where the Angles and the Saxons and the Jutes came from. There's the Jutes up there, and the Saxons and the Angles all came from this area. So if they're coming from that area, which part of Britain do you think they would go to? And here's a little clue. And so that is the part they went to. They went to this bit, okay, and this is the Angles, where the Angles went, okay, and this area is where the Saxons went, okay. This bit, in fact, we can sort of roughly tell from the names we use now. So it is 1500 years ago, but we still call this area East Anglia. So that's a phrase I want you to get used to. And so like we live in Hampshire and it's part of the south of England, this bit of England is called East Anglia. And it's named after the people who came there all those years ago. And this area here is where the Saxons came to start with. The Angles and the Saxons came here first, to the east of Britain. You can see it on this example. Okay, and here they are arriving, and then later, that's when they spread out. So they spread out here, where the South Saxons went, and then to where we live, where the West Saxons went, okay, in probably slightly smaller numbers to these areas. And that's where we get the phrase, the South Saxons are in an area, we still call it Sussex, which is short for South Saxons. We still, quite often we hear that this area, the whole of Hampshire and Dorset and Wiltshire and around here, is known as Wessex, and that comes from the phrase West Saxon. So we are still using all these words now. And this area is Essex, which is the East Saxons. So they've basically given us nearly all the names we use for these areas. Okay, so remember, this is East Anglia, etc. Of course, the whole of our country, England, is named after the Angles. Okay, so that's where we get that word from. Right, and then more of the Angles went up there to the Midlands and the North. Now, so we haven't got much left of what they built, the Anglo-Saxons, and so we often use this, historians use this type of evidence to work out where they went. So we think they went over most of southern Britain, starting in the east, and we use these type of words. So these are all Anglo-Saxon words, which they weren't being used in Britain until they came. So if your town or village has one of these suffixes in it, they're usually suffixes, or this is a prefix, but one of these endings to the word, then it's probably an Anglo-Saxon word. And if we're using that word now, then they probably must have lived here. They must have given the place its name. So if you look at this list here, here's some of the words: Barrow, Bourne, Burr, Bury, Dun, Ford, Ham, Hurst, etc. And Lee is a good one. Can you think of anywhere around us which have these as part of their name? And I bet you can. Okay, so you probably call out a few. If you're at home, just shout them out. Okay, if you're at school, you can put your hand up and tell your teacher. But here's one that I think is an example that you'll all know. So Linford, which is down the road from our school, is an Anglo-Saxon word. So it means that Anglo-Saxons probably lived there, and that they called this because it was a place where you could cross the river. So Linford is a place where you could cross the river. Okay, so you're going to find loads more examples, and you're going to have, if you're at school, you're going to have a sheet like this to fill in. And if you're at home, I've got it on the assignments page for you, or Mrs. Edwards and Mrs. Casson, Mrs. Mars have got it up there, so you'll be able to fill it in at home as well. Yeah. Now, how are you going to know? Well, you might know some anyway, just from thinking about it and talking to your family. But also, you're going to use this map. Okay, so here's a map, and here's where we are in Borden, and there's Linford, which I've already done. And then, as you look round here, all around where we live, can you find any more examples? Oh, look, there's one there. Look, Thursley. Can you find any more examples where they use some of these as part of the place name? Now here's a clue. Look at that. Ham. That's quite common where we live. Okay, so you're going to use this map. So if you're at home, you can pause the video on this page. Okay, or you might even have this map anyway in your cupboard. You can get it out. And so you're going to pause the video on this page and look at this and fill in your sheet and see if you can get something. Now, you might not be able to get an example in every single one of these, because some of these are not so common in the south where we live, but you'll be able to get nearly every one an example locally, an example of a name that could fit in there. Now, I've done another one for you on this map. Here's one, look, Alton. So Alton, the word comes from an Anglo-Saxon meaning. Here it is down here. Any word ending in ton, T-O-N or T-U-N, means it was an enclosed village. So 1500 years ago, Alton was already a village. Yeah, amazing, isn't it? Right, so you find as many as you can, and that is your first task. So you can pause the video on the map, and then when you've done that, that probably might take you 10 minutes. And then when you've finished it, unpause the video and carry on for the next bit. Okay, so here's a few that I've did for you just to give you a bit of a hand. So if we move this box, you'll be able to see some more examples. And I put some in here for the teachers as well. So anything that has ham in it, for example, Hampshire, where we live, the whole county is a Saxon word. Southampton, it's got ham right in the middle, as you can see. And the old name for Southampton in that time, all those years ago, was Hamwick. Then Farnham, Frenchham, Gretham, which is that's one for Mrs. Casson, and then I found one near Mrs. Edwards as well, down at Blendworth. Anything with Worth, Emsworth, etc. Okay, so you're finding any others that you can, and there was just a few to help you out. So now we're going to go back to this. Right. So, well, how do we know? So we know they ended up over the whole of southern Britain using the place name evidence. And how do we know they started in the east, in East Anglia, Essex, and Sussex, and around there? So, it's hard to tell where the Anglo-Saxons were because they built all of their buildings, especially at first, they only used wood. As you probably know, wood rots away over time. So all of this straw roof, all the wooden frame of this building is probably gone. Okay, so if it was built 1500 years ago, it's not there anymore. Whereas buildings made of stone, you can still find them and you can find bits, ruins and evidence. So we know what the Romans did a bit. We know a bit more about them because they used stone a lot in their buildings, but the Anglo-Saxons didn't. So how do we know about them? Well, archaeologists have found a full set of houses over in East Anglia, in Suffolk. Okay, and here's a map showing that village. So they found all these houses here. Even though they're wood, they found what's left of them, and they can work out what they would have been like. And so you can see a typical Anglo-Saxon village with the fields. Remember, it's a long time ago, so we don't have any cars and trucks and railways. And we don't have people, mostly people did work in the countryside as farmers. So things are very different to now. And you can see they would have kept some animals in the fields as well. And they would have had, some areas would have been woodland where they can cut firewood, etc. So it's very, very old fashioned. And they're doing all the farming by hand. And you can see here a little diagram showing a cemetery. Now that's going to be important for today's lesson. And here's a cemetery there. And it's right in the middle of the village. Now this is going to be, through every village pretty much in those days, you would need to be near water because you've got no taps. So if you don't live near a stream, then you're not going to have any water to drink or cook with or wash anything. So basically, you'd be better off living near a stream. Here's their stream coming through the village, okay, or river, and that is something that we need to know about because this is going to help us to, like historians and archaeologists, we have to work out what happened in the past when we can't talk to anybody who was there because, they're all gone. Now, here's something that does survive from Anglo-Saxon times, but what is it? Okay, so it's actually, here's another view of it. It's sideways on, it's exactly the same. It's made of pottery, and so unlike wood, it lasts for a long, long time. So archaeologists have discovered this type of thing, okay, buried in the ground when they dig on a site that they think the Anglo-Saxons lived there, like in the one we've just been looking at in Stowe in Suffolk. It's not very big, it's only a few inches round, and what could it be? Now here's another clue. It goes with this. Okay, this is also made of pottery. It's got some special decorations on it. It must have been really important to them. And this handiwork's very difficult to make this sort of thing, especially in those days. And so it would have taken them a long time. So they must have really cared about what it was. Now you may have already noticed that this looks like it would fit on here. And it does. It's the lid. So this is an urn. Okay, that's U-R-N. It's an urn. And because obviously, like any culture, they used to really care about their relatives who had passed away, they would put their ashes after the cremation. They would put the ashes into this special urn, and they would then get a special stopper made for the urn. Okay, now they weren't Christians, so the designs on here are not things that we're familiar with, like crosses, etc. This is before Christianity had come to Britain. So they would have their ashes in there in a special urn. It was very special to them, very important. They would make a stopper like this, and then they would bury that in the ground. And this is really the best evidence we've got of where the Anglo-Saxons lived, is the example of things they buried in the ground. This one is found in Norfolk, so in that area that we're talking about where we think the Anglo-Saxons came first, and it was found in the ground by archaeologists. Now, here's a map showing where all of these urns were found in East Anglia, and there's loads more in East Anglia compared to other parts of the country. So that's one of the reasons that we think that they settled there first, in the places now we call Norfolk and Suffolk. Okay, now using this map, we're going to complete a table. We're going to have a look at these statements. These are all statements which we're going to look at, and we're going to try and say whether these ideas are true or false. Okay, so these are the sort of things that historians go around saying, but sometimes people say things and they've got no evidence. And in history, we can't do that. We need to check what the evidence says. So, using our map, okay, let's just get the hang of the map so we can see what it says. Just part of Britain, it's not all of it. And over here, this is more of Britain, really. Okay, but we're just choosing to focus on East Anglia for this particular idea. Now, what does it mean? Well, let's use the key. So the light green means that the land in that area is under 30 meters in height. So all of this land here, this is near the sea. Here's the sea. Okay, and this is the North Sea. It's pretty cold. Okay, and there'll be waves crashing in on a windy day. And that land there, we're using the key, is under 30 meters in height. The middle green colour is over 30 meters. That's all this colour here. And this land, the orangey yellow, is over 60 meters. So that's higher ground. All right. All the blue, I think you can call that out if you're at home, what you think these blue lines are. Yeah, I expect you got that. They're rivers and streams. Okay, now the red means that's where they buried people. The early Saxons, the people who arrived first of all about 1500 years ago, and the Middle Saxons are in blue. So there's loads of them, aren't there? Loads and loads of cemeteries. So now we're looking at this map. We're going to have a look at the statements. Okay, and we're going to decide if they're true or false. So here's the statements. You're going to do the deciding in a minute. Statement 1. 1500 years ago, the Anglo-Saxons always buried their dead in land below 300 meters. We're going to consider if that's true or false. And when you're doing it, you're going to flick to the map. See, you'll have the statements on your screen and split the screen with your map. Number 2. 1500 years ago, the Anglo-Saxons never buried their dead on the coast. Number 3. 1500 years ago, all Anglo-Saxon cemeteries were found next to rivers. Number 4. The Anglo-Saxons preferred to bury their dead in land over 30 meters. Number 5. The cemeteries tell us that the Anglo-Saxons lived all over East Anglia. Number 6. The cemeteries are always spaced far apart. Number 7. The Anglo-Saxons always buried their dead no more than 5 kilometers from a river. And number 8, the Anglo-Saxons mostly avoided high ground for their cemeteries. Right, so you're not going to need to do a lot of writing. You just make a note, either T for true or F for false, on your piece of paper or on the screen if you're doing this at home, and then that is what you're going to send in to me and to your teachers. Right, so while you're doing that, you'll have the map showing on your screen so that you can work out if the statements are true or false. So now I want you to pause the video and do that, okay, and work out all of those statements. You need to give either T or F, okay, to say that you think they're true or false. Pause the video for as long as you need to, get that done, and then when you unpause it, we'll talk about what we've discovered. Okay, so I'm assuming you've paused the video and done this task now, and we're going to go through the answers. Don't worry about it if you make the odd mistake, because that's what history is finding out stuff. Okay, and like with any subject, if we make the odd mistake, it just shows we're trying to learn something. So 1500 years ago, the Anglo-Saxons buried their dead inland below 300 meters. That's true, isn't it, on that map? But that's partly because the land in East Anglia is quite flat anyway, and most of the land is quite low level. And of course, the rivers are normally running at a low level. So you're going to be living near a river, and you probably want to bury your relatives near to where you live so you can go and visit their grave like we would. Okay, so that one's true. 1500 years, number 2, they never buried their dead on the coast. All right, well, that's not true, is it? Because here you can see right on the coast there are some cemeteries. So I think if they lived near the coast, then they would have buried their dead near the coast. So that statement's false. All cemeteries were found next to rivers. Okay, well, they're not right next to rivers, are they? Okay, they're near to rivers, that's true, but they're not all next to rivers. 1500 years ago, they preferred to bury their dead. This is number 4. Land over 30 meters. That's not true. They often had cemeteries below 30 meters, and the cemeteries are wherever their villages were, and the villages are near the rivers, like I said before. They lived all over East Anglia. That's true. Their cemeteries were far apart. That's not true. They had one in every single village, and the villages were quite close to each other. They buried their dead no more than 5 kilometers from a river. That one is true. And finally, in statement number 8, they mostly avoided high ground. That one's true. If you look at the orange on the map, there's hardly any cemeteries up there, which probably just means that their villages were always on low-lying land, which is much better for farming and much better for getting your fresh water. Okay, so that's the end of our lesson 2, and I hope you enjoyed it, and I look forward to seeing you soon. All the best.